The 1980s brought us some really cool innovations. Innovations in portable music, innovations in video game systems, innovations in computer systems. And tonight we're going to celebrate with something else from the early 80s. Yours truly. So, it's time to fuel up and geek out. Kilobytes and Caffeine. So tonight's project computer is a Commodore VIC-20. Now, this is actually my first Commodore. I got this on eBay as non-working. When I got it, no power LED. I did check the voltage. I started checking this with a multimeter, trying to see if I could figure out what was going on. Quite honestly, I think it was just a dirty fuse holder. So we're going to go through it tonight. We're going to recap the main board. One of the things that this had when I did get it to power on was video flickering. Now, what the video looked like was this right here, where it was all squiggly, and honestly, it looked like those scrambled channels from the from cable back in the day. And just like those scrambled channels, you could kind of make out what was going on with it. I could sit here and I could keep hitting return. I could watch the cursor go down. Now, we've got some issues with this system. It's dirty. It's got a little yellowing on it, but we're not going to retro bright it. I'm sending this on to a good friend of mine. If he wants to retro bright it, he can knock himself out. But tonight we're going to mostly focus on getting this unit 100% operational. We're going to clean it up inside and out. Now, like I said, it does have some issues with the keyboard. It's missing 3 keys, and spacebar doesn't work. I've also found out that a few keys, even one of the missing keys, doesn't work either. So we've got to clean up the contacts and everything. I'll probably do a lot more work on this keyboard than I usually would. But we're going to strip the keys off of it. We're going to clean those up individually. I do have a capacitor kit from Console 5. I do recommend this if you have a Commodore VIC-20, a Commodore 64, anything. They have kits for just about anything. Now, they are not a sponsor. Paid for this with my own money. Ask my wife. They come with some of the best looking capacitors. These are all Nissan capacitors, which I have used in the past to rebuild a lot of power supplies. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started with this. We're going to tear down the entire unit, recap the board, clean up the board, clean up the external case, put it in, see if we can fire off a game or two.
As you see, the main problems with this Commodore VIC-20 all really reside in the keyboard. The spacebar, the 3 missing keys, and of course the general shape of the unit. Now I do have the original keys that came with this unit. We just need to replace the springs and the key stalks. Now tearing apart this machine is fairly simple. Once you flip it over, you just need to remove these 3 screws on the bottom. I've already done that, so let's get started with this rebuild. Using anti-static brushes to try to loosen up some of the dirt and clean up some of the dust from around these chips. The board actually wasn't in that bad of condition, but some of the more stubborn spots I wanted to hit with a little bit of IPA and these brushes. After cleaning the board, I wanted to go ahead and replace the capacitors. I really wanted this to look nice for you guys, so I tried to use this stand and my desoldering iron. Unfortunately, that desoldering iron, you'll see later on, just didn't seem to work out quite as well as I had hoped. This particular spot for the larger capacitor on the board was troublesome for me. You can see I'm actually trying to help my desoldering iron out there. Eventually I abandoned the desoldering iron and just started pulling caps the way I used to whenever I was a teenager, by heating up the leads and then just letting them kind of come off the board. I understand that's not exactly how everyone does it, but it's a method that's worked for me over the years. At this point, I had abandoned trying to use that stand, and I started heating the bottom of the leads of the capacitors just to get them out the old-fashioned way. Again, this was a method that's worked for me over the years. I could already hear people cringing, safety precautions and everything, but again, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. Once I started doing this, I actually kind of got into the zone. I do apologize, my head is in the way. I didn't realize my camera was kicked back quite so far, but at least the motherboard is full in frame, so there's that. So after some time and some patience, I finally got all of the capacitors replaced. Patience and time is really what it takes to get this done. In my opinion, the only real letdown on this computer was the keyboard. The spacebar didn't work, some of these keys didn't work along with being missing. There was some grime along the top edge there, but let's flip it over and get started on this. I started removing these keys using this key remover. I do recommend this tool if you want to undergo one of these projects. Be careful whenever you do remove the key, just to make sure you use gentle pressure on it. You don't want to break the key stalk. On this particular keyboard, I've already got enough of those to replace and only a few spare parts. When you do take the keys off, be sure on these Commodores to put the springs off to the side. Also, remember that the springs for the regular keys and the springs for the spacebar are two different spring rates. So you always want to make sure you put the spacebar spring off into a separate pile. I used some dish soap under the sink to clean up the keyboard assembly, and then I started cleaning up each individual key stalk with a microfiber cloth that had a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on it. The IPA helped clean up all of the dirt and grime and everything. And you'll see me later, I was cleaning the entire assembly, including the bottom pad, but I later switched to a cotton swab with some IPA on it to finish cleaning them up, just to make sure that we had really good contact on the keyboard PCB. Again, I just used hot water and dish soap to clean up these keys. I used a toothbrush, and later on I wound up putting them all in a wire colander and running them under hot water to rinse them off. For right now, you can actually just see I'm putting them in my lap. There's just something about the sound of freshly cleaned keys. I wanted to leave that in there for you guys. At this point, I was really getting excited. These keys were cleaning up great. I used a microfiber cloth to make sure that I got all of the solid gunk off of them, and yeah, they were really shining up well. I do apologize, it's off-centered. Now the fun begins. Reassembling the keyboard was actually fairly simple because I had taken a picture of the keyboard in its original configuration prior to disassembly. You'll see that I kept referencing it on my phone. You'll also see just there I put in the spring for the space bar just to make sure that I didn't get it confused with any of the other springs. To clean the exterior casing, I just used hot water and baking soda. This unit could be retrobrighted, but I didn't want to go through that process during this video. The new owner might want to retrobright it, and honestly, after cleaning it up, that's really all the exterior needs. It cleaned up very, very well. Now, I did remove the LED prior to doing this, but I did not remove any of the labels or anything. I just dunked it in and let it go. After letting it dry overnight, I just used the microfiber just to get a little bit of residue off of it. Did have one little trouble spot there, but little IPA took care of that. Reassembly was a fairly painless process.
So I haven't plugged anything up yet. All I've done is basically just turn the television on. Everything is exactly the way we set it whenever I set out to do this project. So we're going to see if it passes the smoke test. So you saw how my Macintoshes didn't do so well. I don't know. Okay, the 512K didn't do well. The rest of them did. But this right here is the test. All right, we have power to it. Now let's flick the switch and see what happens. Well, we're back to normal. Only now the spacebar works. Yep. So, I want to call this a success. So the unit, like I had shown previously, it did actually boot up. Now, let's take and fire up some Omega Race. So, we're going to hit F1 for the joystick. Well, it hasn't made me any better at Omega Race, but the fact is, it runs, it plays. I'm going to call this one done. So, I'm going to pack this up, and it's going to go to a good friend of mine, and you guys get to see what I get to start on next. It's going to be something that's a little more in-depth, and it requires a lot more work. But I'm looking forward to the project. This was my first recap on a Commodore board. This was technically my first completed start-to-finish 8-bit computer. I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to bringing you guys more content. I really look forward to working on that computer right over there. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I've had a little too much caffeine.